Well, hi, everybody. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. It is August 23rd, 2023. A lot of 23s in there. Welcome to today's show with my good friend who runs the Driving Force Institute, which is linked up here on site. That's Patrick Riccards. And Pat is going to talk about his new book, which he edited, which is called Why History Matters. And it's the voices of social studies teachers, history teachers, and educators, why it matters. And I put here the voices of social studies teachers in these bizarre times, and I think they are, where there's so much politicalization of the educational process in pre-K-12. And we're going to talk to Pat. And, I just want to say this is kind of the week, the last 2 weeks, when West Virginia University got rid of a lot of liberal arts programs. You all read about that. And it just goes to show you, all right? But if we don't know where we've been, we don't know where we're going, okay? That's my attitude towards history. And if we don't learn about the mistakes of the past, as someone else once said more brilliantly than me, we simply repeat them, all right? So to me, this is a very important undertaking by Pat Rickards, who's just a great guy. You can learn more over at drivingforceinstitute.org. And I'm just going to tell you, we are the American Consortium for Equity in Education. A little tongue-tied today. We are the American Consortium for Equity in Education here at Education Talk Radio. And everything we do is at ace-ed.org, and that includes our Excellence in Equity Awards, our magazine, Equity and Access, as well as all the podcasts. Everything's over there. Everything's free for educators at ace-ed.org. And by the way, if you want to get in touch with me, it's Larry at ace-ed.org. For any reason whatsoever, I'm here, all right? Now, we got Pat on the line. Pat, I'm a little tongue-tied today. Help me out.
Good morning, Larry. I hope you're having a good Wednesday.
I'm trying to. You're going to make it a great one in about 10 seconds here. Just one of those mornings, But I'm so impressed.
Say, Larry,
Yes?
You mentioned what's going on at West Virginia University, but I think that this is something that's been happening for a while. I remember it was, 4 or 5 years ago, you had, an institution, University of Wisconsin, which everybody knows, great liberal arts institution, a public Ivy, fairly, I think liberal in their approach, I would say, at least historically, if you look at the 1960s. And Wisconsin was deciding to eliminate American history as a major. They didn't see the interest or the point at that point.
Whatever happened with that, do you know?
They did. They did eliminate it, as far as I know. I think they're still offering the courses, and you see this at a lot of universities when they realize that there are not a lot of individuals who want to major in something, and so we're seeing across the country. Obviously, colleges are looking to cut costs, and one of the easiest ways to do that is when you have high-priced tenured professors who largely are working with majors or graduate students. If you don't offer the degrees, all you need are junior professors who can offer survey courses. And I know that Wisconsin is looking at moving in things like American Studies and other pieces, but to think of a public flagship like University of Wisconsin even considering that it's time to eliminate American history as a major just becomes so disturbing.
What else is disturbing? In West Virginia University, this past couple of weeks, but also, just in general in public schools. Okay, that's who we're going to talk about your book in detail here. But in public schools, it's people, they're trying to, and you all saw this with this Prager University thing. I know you're on top of that down in Florida. Okay, which is nothing more, by their own admission, I might add. By Prager's own admission, it's Dennis Prager. Okay, it's an indoctrination into a conservative view of a very conservative, in my opinion, in this case only. I like conservative views, but in this case only, absolutely false look at American history. That's what they approved down in Florida. Okay, for social studies. All right, it's absolutely uncertain. Prager University, and no offense to our former president, and I mean that because he was a businessman, okay? And you can name something what you want, but he had Trump, quote, university, okay? It was a university like I'm a university. I always kid around the University of Larry, okay? That's the same university as Trump, and it's the same university as Prager, okay? But I'm kidding, okay? And this is no joke what's going on in Florida. Okay, and I'm sure you read all the articles about it, et cetera, et cetera. And, the teaching it correctly matters. Okay, we can interpret history, as you well know. Okay, we can interpret history any way we want, but you got to know the facts to interpret it. Okay, and then you can look at it from a conservative point of view, from a liberal point of view, or somewhere in between. Okay, but this is just ridiculous what's going on. I'm ranting and raving and not letting you talk, Pat. You got my now. It's not, what is it, 9:06 in the morning? You got my agenda all up here, Pat, because I'm an old social studies teacher. All right, talk to me, Pat. The story behind why your book, Why History Matters.
Sure. No, always happy
to.
This.
Go for it, man.
It's actually a funny path. I mean, a few years ago, as we were launching the Driving Force Institute, somebody had suggested, it would be valuable to talk to some of the leading historians and get their sense of, why history matters, and asking them questions.
Yeah.
What do they tell people in terms of why they've spent their entire lives consuming American history, researching American history, writing about American history. And so we asked a number of great professors who really were very open in discussing this issue. We have a blog that we had launched on our website where we shared some of their answers. Gary Gallagher at UVA, for instance, my alma mater, giving some great answers. James McGregor Burns doing an interview with us and those sorts of things. And as you're talking, you're absolutely right in that as we're asking these faculty members, we're asking them what it's like on a college campus, it just becomes very clear that if you haven't explained why history matters before a student sets foot on a college campus, you've lost them already.
Wow.
We knew from our own research, we had surveyed high school students across the country, and they found that American history was the second most boring subject they were learning in high school. The only thing that was worse was art. And when you ask them why, they would say because history is boring and history is irrelevant. And as the son of an historian, I never thought either was true. And so, that's why we do what we do. But it led us to really wondering, with so many high school students that think this way. And, we all know just about every state in the country requires a survey course in American history in high school in order to graduate.
Right.
My son just took he had to take a state test on American history at the end of his junior year last year. So we know this is a requirement. We know that people are teaching it. We know that the teachers who are teaching it are well prepared. We know that they've studied this. We know that they're good teachers. We've dispelled this notion that we used to have that, the reason why social studies doesn't matter is that's just where they stick the coaches to teach who don't know how to teach. That's not true at all.
No.
One of those great urban legends that we love to latch on to. So we decided, let's go right to the teachers themselves and let's ask teachers why history matters and have them tell the stories about their own experiences, what they do in the classroom in order to make this come alive. And so in reaching out to these teachers, we started hearing some great stories. And we decided that this really would benefit from collecting and sharing these stories. How could we get these tales of success in the classroom? How could we help these teachers who have had to overcome a lot of these issues, being told what they can and can't teach, being scrutinized for how they're teaching it, being attacked for teaching things that in just about every public high school in the United States don't exist, like CRT.
Yeah.
All of these issues. So we asked the teachers to share with us. And I put out a national call and said, I wanted to hear teachers' stories. And I would, if they gave us a short essay, we were looking for about 1,000 words, a short essay on why history matters, what they do to make history come alive in their classroom. If we had selected it for a book, we would pay them $500. Not much. I know for today's teachers, every little bit helps. I wish we could give a whole lot more, but we offered $500 for each essay. And we're so fortunate to hear from teachers across the country, to hear from award-winning teachers, state social studies teachers of the year, Gilder Lehrman Institute fellow teachers, those sorts of things, who have just committed their lives to making history come alive. And, we're not talking about teachers who are, dressing up every day in period outfits. We're not necessarily talking about teachers who feel the need every week to jump on top of their desk and start the charge of the light brigade. But really hearing from teachers in tough classrooms who are having to make these connections. And, the stories were powerful. And I think what becomes so beneficial is we never heard the same story twice. We really, hearing from teachers and making sure that we had, good diversity in terms of gender, in terms of racial balance, in terms of geography, in terms of some of the subjects that they were teaching, and just put together these stories. And we've got, the book comes out next week, and put together these stories in such a way that for any teacher that is ready to just beat their head against the wall, like, what am I going to do? How do I connect this? This is meant to serve as inspiration. This is meant to serve as hope that teachers can see they are not alone in some of the struggles they face in teaching history and teaching social studies today, and that there are other teachers who have been on this same road who have figured out ways to persevere, and they can benefit from each other at this point.
Yeah, and the thing is, we and I want to make sure about this book. The book will be out next week, and I'm sure it will be on Amazon by then, right? Am I correct? Today's the 23rd of August. Yeah. Okay. And please go over to Why History Matters. American History Educators Speak Out. But I want to make an important point here. I don't want this book, and neither do you, Pat, to be preaching to the choir. Yeah, sure. American history teachers, etc., should read the book. Obviously, they're going to get some great ideas, some great thoughts, some great morale boosting, etc., etc. But the important thing is that other people read it, so that they understand, the school board members, etc., they understand why this is important. And it's more important now than ever. Not ever, but pretty darn close to ever. Okay, we're under a lot of attacks these days. Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
You could not be more correct, Larry. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The part of the inspiration behind this also is I remember doing a roundtable discussion with educators after the siege of January 6th. And most around the table were telling me at this point they can't teach this. It is too radioactive. Right. Yeah. You cannot go into the classroom and teach what just happened. And I always tell this story. I wish that my own children were more interested in history. They're not. But on January 6th, our family was in complete lockdown still due to COVID. And I remember my daughter coming into my office later that afternoon asking me, what just happened in D.C.? Mm-hmm. And I was sort of looking at her like, what did you hear? And she was getting her news from TikTok. She was getting, teens and millennials and stuff who are commenting on all of this. And so I'm having this discussion with these teachers, and they're talking about how this is just too controversial. If they decide to teach what just happened on January 6th, they're either going to hear from the administration, or they're going to hear from concerned parents, or they're going to hear from both. And at the time, I was thinking, how can we not teach this? I mean, this is, you're talking about living American history. This is something that's going to be in the history books for generations.
That's right.
And talking about, but yes, maybe it's still too early to talk about what just happened yesterday, because we don't have all the facts. Even today, despite the indictments, we still don't have all the facts.
Right.
But what you can do is you can talk about the British burning the U.S. Capitol during the War of 1812. You can talk about Puerto Rican terrorists storming the floor of the U.S. Capitol or whenever. Shots. Yeah. You can talk about history and how this is not the first time that our U.S. Capitol has been under siege. And I think that, that's one of those things. You need teachers need to understand how to do this, but parents also need to see this and need to understand. We've got this really bad situation here where we've got far too many parents, and I say this as a parent of two high schoolers. I say this as an individual who was scheduled to give a speech that was ultimately canceled by Moms for Liberty because it was seen as too offensive, because I was talking about violent far-right extremism. And we sometimes can't distinguish between those who wear red baseball caps and those who wear white hoods when we're talking about extremism.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, so it's all very real for me. But for these
well, it is
parents,
unfortunately
I
it is.
understand.
Unfortunately, it is real. And were you going to speak at that Moms for Liberty? They had that thing in Philadelphia. Was that where you were going to speak?
Yes. No. This was somewhere else. I was actually invited by a public library to come speak on the notion of compassion and second chances. But we have this fear, and I think you see it stoked by parents across the country. We see some of the things that have happened in school board meetings across the nation, is that we blurred the lines now between education and indoctrination. And, we don't understand that, for those, the tens, the hundreds of thousands of teachers out there who are teaching American history each and every day, they're not looking to indoctrinate anybody. This is not teaching civic activism.
Yeah.
They are looking to provide individuals with enough knowledge so that they can be critical thinkers, so that when they are told something, the first thing they can ask is why, or they can try to push back and refute it. That's what we should want in all of our kids. And I think that's that sort of passion that you find in the pages of this book.
Well, exactly. And, it's funny you should say that. Your book's called Why History Matters. And I think the first thing every history teacher should talk about is that history matters. And I think that kids then have to answer, why does history matter, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Smith, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Okay? And this is the kind of thing. And I got to ask you this. The book is a compendium, if I may, of American history teachers speaking out. All right, and Pat, you've been in this business for a while. How many educators did you the interviews did you get with all this? How many essays?
So, in the final book, we have more than 25 essays. We have more than 25 essays,
and they're from all over the country. All right,
yep.
and I'm sure they're pretty balanced. And I want to ask you, just real quick, what was your favorite when you really thought about it? What was your favorite one? Did one stand out? This is not an insult to the other 24. This is just something really, yeah.
It's one of those fabulous things. When you look at this, you really start exploring it. You see it's the different pieces that teachers have pulled together. It's the teachers that, there's one essay from a teacher in Georgia who, was able to really turn her classroom into a place for active education. Where it was more than just listening to a lecture. She had her students out, community involved. You have those teachers that will tell the stories about how they helped demonstrate that the history they were teaching was relevant. You have, and we heard this in Georgia, we heard this in Oklahoma, we heard this in New Jersey. You had teachers who recognized that for their students. History needs to be about more than the dead white male landowners that you often have in the history.
Exactly.
It's those sorts of stories, where they're really able to connect and are able to. And I think it's why I do the work that I do. Are able to bring resources other than a Basel textbook into the classroom. You and I have talked about the work that we've done in Kentucky and bringing those Kentucky teachers in. And really helping them get the resources they need to make Kentucky history come alive. That work that we do is successful because we heard directly from the teachers. We heard not only about how they need to present information, but what are those stories that they want to teach. And I think that's what becomes so important with these stories that we're talking about. You're not, when you talk about why history matters, you don't see any of the teachers in our book talking about why it's so important to teach that George Washington was our founding father, or why it's so important to teach that Franklin Roosevelt served as president longer than anybody else. It's not the facts that you're going to try to impress somebody at a trivia night with. It is really, for these teachers, it's bringing in those pieces. What is it about history that makes it come alive? And I think, we know this from any corner of our lives. It doesn't matter if you're teaching history, if you're teaching physics, if you're teaching about the dinosaurs, or you're teaching how to apply makeup on TikTok. If you have a passion, and if you're allowed to channel that passion, it comes across, it becomes contagious. And I think what we see from all of these teachers in chapter after chapter, essay after essay, is this is about how they move the teaching of American history beyond the basic standards that their states offered. Nobody's talking about taking the standards, throwing them out the window, and doing what they think is best. But they all recognize, and I think this becomes important for teachers, no matter what the subject matter is, no matter what the grade they teach, is recognizing that the standards that the state puts before us, those are meant to be floors. Those are not meant to be ceilings. Those are not designed to prevent us from teaching beyond the standards. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you see from each and every one of these writers. You see these educators talking about how valuable it is to go beyond the basics and really connect with their learners in a way that only good history education can do.
Would you say that the book is more about teaching how do I want to say this? Teaching technique in these days? Okay, is it more about that, or is it more about the philosophical reason for teaching history these days? Okay, and I hope I asked that question in a proper manner. Yeah, okay, thank you. I wasn't trying to phrase that properly. But a lot of what you're talking about is technique, and I love that. Believe me, I love that, because the more we can engage students of every race, every color, every gender, every religion, et cetera, the more enjoyable this is going to be, the more important it is to them. But just as American citizens, it matters. But those are techniques. But what about the philosophy? Where would you put the book? In philosophy or technique? Sure. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a great question. And no, we're not teaching pedagogy in this book. I'll tell you that.
I know. I had a feeling you weren't. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that combination of philosophy and technique. Because I think you see that, we've got, different philosophies and different ideologies that are at play here. You can see that in the teachers. This is not a book of, collection of stories from teachers who have all decided to buck what they see as, these new standards. That's not it. You see some that are figuring out how do we enhance what we're teaching so that our students learn there's more to it. So you're incorporating that sort of philosophy. But you're also seeing the technique, and I think that becomes so useful when, I think we live in an era where teachers sometimes are afraid to stray beyond what's been prescribed by their district or by their state. And this book, really tells very personal stories about the classroom. About what works. I always love. My mother was a high school English teacher for decades, and used to teach some of the toughest 10th graders. She taught American literature, and it's one of those. And I think anybody who's been in a high school knows that if there's anything that's fairly prescribed, it becomes 10th grade American literature.
That's for sure.
And she excelled. She used to work. A lot of her students were basic students. Back when we used to track students that way, she was not somebody who was teaching the honors classes because she really wanted to work with the students that needed her the most. And I remember it was always that funny thing. She would teach her students The Raven. And we have a wonderful video about the Raven's author that's part of our own collection.
Mr. Poe.
But she's teaching the Raven. And one of the things that to her was always important was that once they got through it, once the students had read it, once the students had discussed it, she would then, as part of the closing class before they moved on to the last unit, she would show one of the segments from the TV show The Simpsons where they recreate the Raven. And my mother is a hardcore, old school, tough teacher. I remember, she's a 5-foot woman, and I remember, I used to see her in the hallways, and she'd be sitting there wagging her finger in the face of a 6'5" linebacker because he wasn't getting his work done. She was old school.
Yep.
But she would let them see that. And
kids
I used
love
to
that.
joke. I'm like, you barely wanted me to watch The Simpsons at home. Here you are showing it in class. And for her, it was, she needed them to see there were other interpretations, and she needed them to see that there was a way to connect what she had just taught them with, at this point, this was 1990, 1991. The Simpsons were the most popular show for kids that age.
I well remember.
This was a way for her to connect it, for them to see that this was not just some boring poem written by some weird dude in Baltimore 200 years ago. This was something that could really come to life, and they could find that interest. And I think you see a lot of that. I see a lot of those lessons I learned from my own mother in some of these stories as teachers really work. And how do they bring the community into these classrooms? How do they move beyond the basics so that students see there's value in what they're learning? Yeah,
exactly. And, history matters on a large basis, but you got to see the forest from the trees, so to speak. And sometimes you got to see the trees from the forest, because the trees make up the forest. I'm trying to get this analogy correct in my head. Okay. And the point is, whoever you're teaching, okay, you got to bring the history alive to them. Okay. That's what makes it interesting to kids, because their ancestors were somewhere when all this was happening. And if somebody made a left turn, not a right, they wouldn't even be there. Yeah. Okay? It's that simple. And this where we have been matters to where we are and where we are going. Okay? It's that simple. All right? And we've got to find ways to engage kids and make sure that teachers understand philosophically, as you would use that word a little while ago, why we need to understand why the history we teach matters. Yeah. All right, it's just so darn important. Pat, we got to go. I'll tell you, buddy, that you're going to do good with this book. Let's push it. Can you send me? Do you have a copy of it? You can ever send me when it comes out?
I will send you. Absolutely, I'll get a copy out to you now.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Good luck with it. And we're going to do another show. I just saw it on the calendar. I think in about like September 20th or something. And I want to hear how the book's doing. Okay.
Good. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, sir.
Why History Matters, American History Educators Speak Out. That's the author, Pat Riccards. Thank you, Pat. Oh, Pat left. That's great, my buddy. Pat Riccards from the Driving Force Institute. It's all linked up here. And next week, the book will be up on Amazon. All right? And please, this is, like I said, it's not just preaching to the choir. It's educators. Why History Matters. We got to understand it. All right, we're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org. And we got another show coming up, okay, about how they're working with homeless children down in Texas, okay, and education, etc. My name's Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. Thanks so much for listening today.